The stage is yours, Alex. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Again, just like the other talks, if you have any questions, use Slido and ask your questions there. Thank you.
Okay, hey everyone. How many Hungarian speakers do we have in the audience? Okay, can I try my 3 sentences that I've learned? Okay, here we go. Jó napot! Alex vagyok, Angliából jöttem, és Németországban élek, magyarul tanulok. I started learning Hungarian like 3 months ago, and it is a really hard language, people. I speak 3 languages, and Hungarian is really hard. Well done for speaking that, all of you. Okay, thank you for joining me in my talk. It makes my little tester heart explode with delight to see so many people in a talk about something that is going to be about testing. So don't run away. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fine. Right, what are we going to do? Bit of an introduction to me. I have a lot of roles and a lot of hats, but I always identify as a tester because I feel like I go through this world and I test it. Sometimes when I don't want to. I test processes, I test languages, I test countries, I test systems, and almost every system or process I come into contact with, I find problems in it. And I think that's why I'm a tester. I'm a manager as well, but don't worry, I'm a good manager and it's all fine. And I am an explorer of my own panic zone. I usually end up finding myself in a situation going, how did I get here? Which set of steps led me to what I am doing right now? That's fine for me. I get to do that a lot in my company. I work for a company called Bradex. We are based in Germany. I have an awesome team. Obligatory, if you want to join my team, say hello to me or come and or write to us there. And how did I get here today? Well, I've been testing for many years now. And I've been doing a lot of work with exploratory testing, and if you're not really sure what that is, I'm going to explain what that is in a second. I've always loved doing it, and I've always thought it was important, but also kind of not really cool and hip to talk about, which is, like, isn't that sad when your own passion is something that you're like, actually, it's not that cool? Like, that's a whole new level of not loving things. But over the years, I've really learned that we just don't talk about this well enough, maybe. And I was doing a lot of things. I was doing test-opsies. I was doing live exploratory testing sessions where I would stand on stage and just someone would say, go and test this app. And then I would go and test it and say how I'm testing it. And through these things and through teaching testers and teaching developers, I realized that there are a lot of interesting things going on when we do exploratory testing that maybe we should be talking about. And I decided that since I like talking, I would be one of the people to talk about it. Speaking of talking, can everybody understand my accent so far? Yeah? Okay. I come from Liverpool, so I don't speak like you learn English. And I'm aware of that. So if at any point you don't understand something, then just wave. Okay, what are we going to do? I'm going to give you a brief introduction to exploratory testing so that everyone's on the same page. Then I'm going to talk about a couple of stories, how I got into looking at this in more detail. We're going to talk about heuristics. I'm going to give you some examples. I'm going to give you some homework, if you like, about how to go and do this yourself. And then hopefully you'll all go out here going, yeah, exploratory testing is the thing that I need to learn more next. Okay, who knows what exploratory testing is? Okay, so there's enough people that the next 3 slides make sense. This is good. For the people who know, try not to fall asleep, and if you do, don't snore, okay? Right, what is it? I like using the definition that Marit Pjarvi uses. It's an approach to testing, and it says we need to be learning, and learning needs to change what we're doing. So we're not doing scripted tests. We're not writing down the exact steps that we're going to do. We do something, we learn, and we adapt. I realized at one point when I was working with a developer, I gave him a problem to solve that I couldn't solve. I was like, can you help me do this thing? It's some kind of weird XML, and I can't parse it. And he was sitting there going, okay, I'll fire it up in Eclipse. Maybe if I do this, maybe if I do this. And I looked at him and went, you're exploring. And he looked at me and went, this is what you mean when you say exploring? Exploratory testing isn't the only thing. So anytime we don't know in advance what we need to do to solve a problem, debugging, development, for me, getting out of bed in the morning, and we need to find out what the next steps are, then we're exploring. So those are the general things what exploratory testing is. What it never, ever is, what I never want to hear any of you saying is this is clicking around. The only entities that would theoretically be capable of just clicking around are zombies. Do we have any zombies here? Excellent. First of all, because that would be scary. Second of all, none of you are ever clicking around when you're doing exploratory testing. The problem is that we're not very good at describing what we're doing, and that's what I want to work on. So, why do we need it? The very quick 4-point guide that I use. The first one is a testing fact, I guess, pesticide paradox. We all know that bugs are not where I'm looking for them, right? You have a test, you run it, that's not where the bugs are. You still need the test, because if you take the test away, the bugs will come back, because that's how sucky life is, but they're never there where you're looking for them. The second point is unknown unknowns. A little bit philosophical. There are things that we can prove that we know. There are things that we can prove that we don't know. Those are the questions I know to ask. And there are the things that we don't even know that we don't even know them. And those are the ones, if you will forgive my English, French, that bite us in the ass after we've released, right? My story about this is pelicans. I went for a run in a park in the morning. It was dark, I didn't know the city, and I was on my own. What risks am I thinking about as a solo female runner at that thing? What risks do I think about? Usually someone says first, you might get lost. I'm like, thank you. Theoretically, I could get lost, I could injure myself, I could be attacked. These are things that I had on my risk list. I was aware of these risks. I was not prepared to be attacked by a pelican, which is what actually happened, because I saw a pelican. I was like, wow, that looks like a dinosaur, because what you need to know about me is that I'm terrified of dinosaurs, and I grew up in a city, so I know sparrows and I know pigeons. Anything else that's big and flies is basically a dinosaur, right? So I was like, ooh, dinosaur, Instagram. And then it attacked me. And I ran away. So there are always going to be pelicans, which is why we need to do exploratory testing, because we can only automate or script for things that we've identified. You with me so far? Very good. OK, the next thing, and I have a video for this, observational blindness. We'll get to that in a second. And the fourth is because we always end up needing it, and I will show you a flowchart. OK, if you've seen the video before, don't spoil it for the other people. It's my favorite video. Also, my clicker should work. No, damn it. Yes.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13.
Who had 13? Very good.
But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Who saw the moonwalking bear? Who had seen the video before? Yeah. There he is. Okay. The point, there are people who say, oh my God, if you're teaching exploratory testing, please stop showing this video. I refuse to stop showing this video because it shows something that I have experienced so often. I was a product owner for 8 years for a tool. I knew this tool better than I knew my hands. Like, I saw it more often than I saw my face in the mirror. We updated the platform. We had identified loads and loads and loads of tests that we needed to do because the last time we updated the platform, everything went wrong. We released it. We were super happy, like, well done, good job, product owner, good job, testers. The first question that came in is, why are all of the colors different? But we were so focused on looking for all of the other problems that we'd identified that we didn't even notice that the whole color scheme had changed. It's true. I shit you not. Are we allowed to swear at this conference? Anyway, and the other thing is, and this is one thing I realized, and this is something that you can take with you, there's a flowchart I did a couple of years ago. So I often get put in a situation for me or for my testers where someone says, yes, we want you to do some manual testing for us. And it's usually like, yes, we've been developing for like 8 years, and in 2 weeks we want to release, can you do the test? So I'm like, okay, well, sure, go on, whatever. Yeah, we have test scripts. Okay, this is fun. Are there really test scripts? Probably not, which means that we have to end up doing exploratory testing anyway. If they are there, are they up to date, or have they been, like, I don't know, festering in Excel or HP or whatever it is the tool that you're using? Probably not up to date, so we're going to end up exploring as well. If we have them, can they all be done in time? Also probably not. And if they all can be done in time, are we going to feel confident after doing them all? And you know already from unknown unknowns that we can't possibly feel confident just after executing manual test scripts. And it says, I've never reached this point, but actually, to be 100% honest with you, I've never reached this point. The rest of it was actually like a mind experiment to see what it would happen. So we always need it. That is Exploratory Testing 101. You are all certified Alex experts. Well done. OK, let's get to the main thing. So exploratory testing. Stories that I have about this, and I could tell tons. One of my favorite ones is, again, being a product owner, I said, you know, for this release, could we take a charter in for our command line tools? And they were like, but we haven't touched them. I'm like, you know, just do me a favor. Just you know, indulge the crazy product owner. Take in a charter for our command line tools. A day later, they come back and they're like, how did you know? Like, because we always mess up the command line tools. We always, this is, by the way, the familiar problems heuristic. Things that we always mess up, we will always mess up again. Then I was pairing with another tester. And at some point, we were pairing on an application that neither of us know. We were just doing some practice. It was the IKEA kitchen planner. And at one point, we both said, ooh, we should now try and go back. And we were like, what? Why did we both get the same idea at the same time? This is interesting. Observing people when they're testing, noticing that they do similar things to what I would do in that situation. Or when I'm sitting next to someone when they're a domain expert and I'm pairing with them to help them learn exploratory testing, and I say, oh, that's interesting, let's go and have a look at that. And 5 minutes later, we found a really interesting bug. Now, I would love to be able to say, the trick is just add Alex, she's awesome, right? That would be my business model for the future, but I honestly don't quite believe that it's just as easy as that. So I'm thinking, what is actually happening when we're doing exploratory testing? So my aims with getting into this is to be able to teach testing better, to be able to do it better. I want to improve as well. And I think that this is this is a whole nother talk, but I think that exploratory testing is going to be one of the skills that we need most coming into the future, most especially because we are doing a lot more with machines and with automation. That means that we need to be looking even harder at the unknown unknowns. That is my firm belief. And everyone needs a manifesto these days, so I have a manifesto. It's called Loosely Held Strong Opinions, because I am willing to be changed in some of them. So we've had number one already. Exploratory testing is not clicking around. Everyone is a natural explorer. I used to believe that only testers should do exploratory testing, and I've actually changed my opinion on that now. Exploring is completely natural, and the people who practice at it get better. It's like language and linguistics. I studied linguistics, which means that I'm very good at analyzing language. All of you speak a language, or more than one, which means you're very good at speaking the language. But I am the exploratory tester to your natural explorer, right? If you practice at something, you will get better at it. OK, testing is not the only thing that is exploratory. When we get to the heuristics later, we actually find out that everything that we do as humans, we don't script things. We do things based on guidelines, and everything that we do is like that. Exploratory testing is my weapon of choice, and I will go as far as to say that it is a true best practice. Now, I know that there are a lot of people who really hate the word best practice because there aren't any best practices, there are only good practices in context. I have not yet found a context where exploratory testing wasn't a good idea. Take that as you will. OK, I think exploring and agile are based on the same logical premises. We do something, we learn, we adapt. And I think, like I said, it's going to be just as or even more important in the future, which means, to me, this is the call to action and why I'm talking about this and why I love talking about it, is that we need to reduce the amount of things when we say, OK, if you're a good exploratory tester, you have intuition and you have experience. I can't teach intuition and experience. I can't get a new tester into my role and say, OK, here's the 4 reasons why it's important. Now come back in 10 years. That's not a good way of creating new good testers or new good developers. So I want to get behind that and get to explanations and teachable practices, and that's what we're going to look at right now. Because if you ask people when they're doing exploratory testing, why did you do that? How did you know how to do that? 9 times out of 10, they will say, oh, I don't know, just kind of knew, or intuition or experience. But we're not very good at saying exactly what that was. And I think that behind every is a very dangerous word, which is why it's in quotes, every gut feeling, everything that I feel that I just want to do, that there is a heuristic. And the experience shapes our heuristics. And now I've talked about heuristics for long enough to actually tell you what I mean when I say it. Okay, the very easy way of looking at it is it's a rule of thumb. It's something that helps us to find a good enough answer very quickly to difficult questions. So, like I said before, even getting out of bed is exploratory and heuristic, right? Some mornings I get up, I do my yoga, this is good. And some mornings I hit snooze 5 times. I don't have, and that will depend. The heuristic of how am I going to end up getting out of bed today isn't a script. I'm not one of those people that can just do it the same way every time. Katrina Clokey has a very good example. If she wants to open a very, very tight jar, she tries it herself first, then she tries it with like a tea towel around it. If that doesn't work, then she runs it under hot water, and if that doesn't work, then she'll go and ask someone to help her. This is all heuristic. If she said in advance that will be exactly the steps I will do, she probably wouldn't say that. And the very interesting thing where this gets into how our minds work, from Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, some things are chosen. Some things are very strategic. We know that this is how we approach this problem, right? If I'm debugging, then one of the things I might do is set breakpoints. One of the things I might do is add some print statements if I don't have anything better. I might add weights into my test. These are heuristics that I can use to start solving this problem. And I can even have a checklist for those, like, have you tried this? Have you tried this? And some of them are intuition. Some of them, we have this system 1, system 2 that I'm not going to go into. But system 1 is the thing that happens very, very fast. We don't think about the fact that we're doing it. But behind those intuitions are procedures that have become automatic, and that if we learn to describe them, we can make them strategic and talk about them. We also have to be careful because they can become biases. So that familiarity problem, so stuff that we messed up before we'll mess up again, that actually comes from the availability heuristic. Things that I've seen often, I will expect to see again. And the availability heuristic switches over into the availability bias, which means that if my mum reads an article about a problem in, I don't know, on a roller coaster, and she knows I'm going to go on a roller coaster, and she says, oh, be careful, Alex. The fact that I fly, drive, and cross the road every day, we never hear about those problems, right? So they're not in our minds. So it's all interesting about how our minds work. And if we learn how to do that, what we are doing, then we can use it strategically, then we will be better, and we can teach it to others. I'm not the first person to say this. Again, Katrina Clokey has said this. The value of learning more about heuristics is in discovering how other people think and to describe our own thinking. And the fun thing is, I think there are going to be a lot of shared things there. Of course, there will be things where we differ as well. That's why it's so important to have diverse teams. We don't all think the same way. We don't all have the same heuristics, and we don't all have the same experience. Okay, so we already talked, this is going to be the part where I start inventing terms. We already talk about the idea of heuristics in testing. They are things that help us to widen our horizons. Okay, where can I get test ideas from? Okay, if I'm working with databases or anything that's data-like things, then we all know CRUD. CRUD is a heuristic. And it gets a little bit meta because even having it as a I can never pronounce this word, mnemonic, like CRUD, that is a heuristic for helping us to remember something, right? Anyway, we know create, read, update, delete. Bless you. That's a heuristic that we can use when we're testing databases. And there are various others. Elizabeth Hendrickson talks about Goldilocks. Too big, too small, just right. We know that as equivalence classes and boundary analysis, but I actually prefer Goldilocks because it sounds more fun. And there are plenty, and I'm not going to go into these today because they are well discussed. They are very, very useful. But for me, these are high level. These are how am I approaching what I'm going to do maybe in an hour of testing. And what I am interested in is something that I am talking about, and I've decided to call it micro-heuristics. First of all, because it sounds cute. Second of all, because I always wanted to invent a name for something. And the idea is, if we go back to Marit's description, if we're testing, we're learning, and learning changes what we're doing. How are we using what we have just learned to say what we're going to do next? So a micro-heuristic is a quick way of determining what's next while we're testing, and they will usually result in the direct next action. That can be something as simple as, oh, I just created this thing. Oh, now I'm going to go back. The very idea, if you'd have said to me, how are you going to do this test? I might never say I'll go back after I've created it. But for some reason, I decide to at that point, how do I get there? And that's what I'm excited about. And I have some stories and some things to test out on you that I have started describing. So the first one is called the pimple heuristic. I am encouraging you all to squish your zits. Oh, come on, you all do. Don't even lie. So when I noticed this, I was teaching exploratory testing at a customer, and they had noticed a problem that a field that they had just entered data into and then tabbed out of, that field became empty. And so they went back to the field, they put some more data into it, they searched for the old value, and they did some other things like, okay, why are you doing that? And the first answer was, oh, well, just cause. And I'm like, okay, no, just cause isn't a good enough answer. Why did you do that? Well, we think that there might be a problem with it, so if we interact with the field, then maybe we'll find out. They didn't find a problem there, but 2 stations up, some people had just found a problem with the login. It was a bit weird. The password field there was something odd. So they poked the password field and found a security hole. So the idea with the pimple heuristic is if something seems odd, then poke it. Poke it until something interesting comes out, or until you're satisfied that it's not going to. I know that this is really disgusting, but it will help you to remember it. Poking can be anything like searching for it, changing the data, clicking in, even just clicking if we're talking about UIs, right? Just any kind of touching it will make this thing maybe do a thing. That was very specific, but I think you get my point. Okay, ifs are iffy. So one of the things that I have learned is that if we are talking about ifs in real life are likely to be ifs in code. That is an assumption I have because I can write a little bit of code, and I know every time that I've had to model something that was dependent on things, then I've usually ended up using ifs or something similar. I also know from my very dangerous amount of coding knowledge that you can make a lot of mistakes by putting an else in a wrong place or forgetting something. So me as a tester, if I hear a lot of things in terms of the domain, okay, if we do this, then this, and if we do this, then this, and I'm like, ooh, this is good, right? So that's going to change my next decisions. It's really hard to talk about this one without using the word if too often. If I notice that there are a lot of conditions, then I start to explore those specifically while I'm doing it, and also what is not happening. My model might be wrong. It might be the case that there are different ways of modeling, different ways of doing things that don't use ifs. But the great thing is that if I talk to people about it while I'm doing it, then somebody might say, yeah, but in this case, Alex, it's not the case, and then I've learned, and then my testing gets better. And if I never talked about it, then we'd have never known. So ifs are iffy. Anytime we notice something being dependent on something else, our next steps can be to explore the conditions and consequences. And as a rule of thumb, the more ifs we hear, the more likely we are to find a problem. Okay. Yellow is interesting. When I was looking for the picture for this slide, I actually lost myself in a small rabbit hole of why traffic lights for cars and traffic lights for pedestrians follow different systems. Because one of them's binary and the other one has... Anyway, I got lost for a little while, and that's what I mean when I say I'm an explorer. Any time that we have something that is not just yes or no, black or white, 1 or 0, red or green. So we're still talking about ifs, but we're talking about a very, very specific state of ifs, something where I have some kind of state or status, and it's not just binary. That is, for me, interesting. And actually, the yellow is interesting comes from a specific session with a tester. I was working with him on something that I know nothing about. It's a big, complicated application for doing things with production and sales, and what do these people want and what do those people want. And they had a status, and it was red, green, or yellow. And I said, ooh, yellow's interesting. Let's go and explore that. That was the 5 minutes later we'd found an interesting problem. Because my understanding is that any time we're having to model a state that isn't just yes or no, that is more interesting and therefore more difficult. And so if I see something that is not just red, green, yes, no, then I explore the factors leading to and from yellow, or the middle state, or not the external. Of course, as a good exploratory tester, I'm also going to look at the yes or no's. But my decision of what to do next, as soon as I see something that's yellow, in this case, I'm going to go and explore that, and that has helped me a few times. OK, if you can touch it, it's real. How many people have, or take this with you, when you see users working with software or people testing software, and you've got your very kind of, you've got something where you create an object, and the object appears directly in some kind of interface, which often happens because it's good feedback for the user, right? If you create something and you can't see it, the user's like, OK, did it work? Did it not work? Watch how many people, let's say we have an example you've created something and it appears in a list. Watch how many people, when it's being created, click it. It is fascinating, because just seeing it isn't believing. That's not true enough. And I've had enough examples myself in my career of applications where something would appear in the UI and you'd be like, yay, everything's fine. And of course, your automated test would say everything is green. And then you click it and it goes boom, because something didn't work with the creation of it. And it's only when you touch it that actually that happens. Watch for people doing that. So seeing is not believing. Touch it to see if it's really there. Touching it can be clicking it can be selecting it can be searching for it. It's a little bit of a precursor to poke it till it pops. It's a bit poke it, it might pop, right? When I saw this, I was fascinated about how many people do this. And related to this, if you see something that shouldn't be there, touch it. The first time I realized I was getting really, really technical was when I saw something that was still left over in a search dialog, and I had already deleted the thing. It was still in the search dialog, and I said to myself, if I click this, I'm going to get a null pointer. And I did. And I was so happy. I didn't go to the developer and be like, ha ha, stupid null pointer. I realized I knew how these things are working. So if you see something, touch it. And if you see something that shouldn't be there, touch it as well to see what happens. Naming. Oops. I was in a talk just before lunch. I think the lady's name was Asha. She said, names are important and meaningless. And I loved that, because yes, naming is important, but names are meaningless. As a tester, one of the things I look for when I'm working with an application is how things are named. Because if something has a different name, and I think it's the same thing, then lots of little neurons start firing in my brain. That is, was it a different team that did this bit? And if so, what other things did they do differently? Is it somebody didn't understand? Maybe there are problems there. Was it we were under pressure, or this was migrated from something else? Just something as small as in one view it's called search, and the next view it's called find, and I can't see a reason why they should be different. I know that search and find can have different meanings, but if I don't see why they should be, then I'll go, The same thing is true for localization. I know that localization is maybe a small problem in an application, like, okay, we forgot to translate that bit. But I ask myself, what else has gone wrong? So if I see something that I think is interestingly named or not named in the same way as something else, then I ask myself questions, and then I go and play with those things. I go and explore. Does it work the same way in both areas? Do they have the same effects? Are there differences? Is there interplay between the two things? Those are my next steps. Those are my micro heuristics as soon as I see something that is named differently. Okay. You can never go back. I have learned from, again, being a product owner and being a tester, that writing things like undo and back is tricky. I have heard that writing your own undo stack is something that nobody really wants to do. Which means for me as a tester, I'm probably going to find a lot of fun things there. So undo and redo, as soon as I see that there is the possibility to do that, that guides my next decision. Can I go back from here? Can I go back from there? Can I go back completely? Do I expect to be asked to save? Or do I expect to lose my data? What kind of things is going to happen? And this gets even more interesting in browsers. I love nothing more than working with an application that has its own back button and the browser back button. It's like Christmas for me, because I know there's going to be so many things that are going to go wrong, potentially. So retracing steps, going backwards, as soon as I see I can, that leads me to the micro heuristic of the next decision. Let's do that. Let's see what happens there. And these are things that you might write down as a test charter. Back should work. But in the detail that you do it when you're exploring, you're never going to write that down. Okay, breaking the chain. Deleting things is surprisingly difficult, because it turns out that we write software to model relationships between things. And then if we have things that are linked to other things and we want to delete them, then there's always the question, what happens to that relation? Do we have to get rid of it? Do we have to lock stuff if we're using databases? Do we say, OK, they're kind of zombies and hanging around? So as soon as I can see that something is deleted or that I delete it, I don't stop when I've written my deletion test or when I've done my deletion. I then go and say, OK, what about all of the things that were connected to this? I go and touch them. I search for them. I try and reassign them. I try and find the link back to this thing, even though I know it was already deleted. My most recent example of this was, that was it, LastPass. I created myself a LastPass account, very proud of myself, and promptly forgot my master password. This is what I say when I mean I'm a tester. Like, I'm sure they have that use case, but it didn't really work so well. So eventually I deleted my account. They said, well done, your account is deleted. You can create your new account. So I go with my email address, the same one, obviously. And what did they say? Already in use. I'm like, OK, so I'll do maybe the deletion didn't work. I'll do that again. Oh, no, it's not there when I look for it here, but it is when I try and create. So I sent them a support email, and they said it takes a while. I'm like, yeah, I kind of figured, but that's helpful. So deletion is interesting. Those are the kind of things, if I delete something, I'm going to go and touch, prod, search for, undo again. Undo and deletion is also a fun thing. Those are the things that guide my next steps. Right, those were some examples. How have I got to this? Who knows what a testopsy is? Yay! It's like an autopsy, but with fewer dead bodies. The idea of a testopsy is that you describe what you want. You need to imagine the person doing an autopsy who's explaining into the microphone what they're doing. That's kind of what you're doing when you're doing a testopsy. You're saying, I'm doing this because of this, I'm noticing this. So you describe explicitly what you're doing. You observe, you notice, you name things. Giving things names makes it explicit, which means you can talk about it, which means you can model it. And then when you've realized something, you try and do it intentionally. So all of the things that I just shared with you are things I've noticed, and now I try and do them intentionally. And then sometimes I realize, OK, it works. Sometimes it doesn't work, and then I adapt how my model works. Observe other people. Ask yourself and other people, why did you do that? Why did you make that choice as your next choice? And do not accept just because felt like it, I don't know. We need to get deeper than that. We need to get deeper into our minds than that. And the question that I always ask myself is, what did I just see or experience? And what did that make me think or decide? And the funny thing is, I'm not super at this either yet. Sometimes the first thing I realize is I just made a decision. And then I go back and say, OK, what led me to that decision? And sometimes I realize, I just noticed something, and now I'm going to make this decision. This is hard work. Using your knowledge. So I have a great gray box knowledge of software. There's a saying in German, gefährliches Halbwissen, which means dangerous half-knowledge. And that is what I run around the world with in terms of software. The great thing is, as a tester, because I don't know everything, it makes me even more paranoid, which is good. So anything that you know, or you think you know, use that while you're describing these things. And if it turns out that that was wrong, someone will teach you, and then you're cleverer, and that's cool. Narrating your own testing, talking to yourself while you're testing. It's like a testopsy. It's difficult. It is really, really exhausting to narrate your own testing, because what you're doing is testing and talking about what you're doing at the same time. And while we are exploratory testing, the things that are going on in our minds are all of these micro-heuristics, all of our test ideas, all of our experience, time management and priorities, noticing things, figuring out whether we're still on the right track, and. And then on top of all of that, you're like, oh, and I'm just going to talk about what I'm doing as well. It's exhausting, and it gets a bit meta. I love this picture. It is a painting of a painter painting a painting. This is how you feel if you're doing this kind of test narration. And also, the things that I've just given you, those are my heuristics for identifying heuristics. They might not work for you, but they might, so try them. And if they do, then that's awesome, and if they don't, tell me what did. The point is that we are, when we are exploring, be it exploratory testing, be it working on development problems that we don't know how to figure out yet, the stuff going on in our brains is phenomenal. Like, my favorite thing is to go out of a room when I've been teaching people exploratory testing, and they go, I never realized how good I was at my job, because we just don't talk about this. We are superhumans. The stuff that our brains is doing at this time is amazing. But if we don't learn to talk about it, then we don't appreciate it for ourselves, and other people don't appreciate it either, and then you end up in these really dangerous projects where people are like, we don't need the person who's really good at exploratory testing because we have all of the automation. I see that as being dangerous. So, your homework, if you're not exploring already, start doing it. You can do it at various levels. You can do it at the UI level, you can do API exploratory testing, you can do unit exploratory testing, you can look at your next debugging challenge as something that you want to see how you explore it, what are your strategies, what are your heuristics. Do it in a pair or in a mob, because doing anything like this with other people forces you to talk about it more, and of course, if you've got someone sitting next to you the whole time going, why did you do that? Why did you do that? What are you thinking? Yes, you might hate them after a while, but it will help. And then you get to do the same thing back to them as well at the end, which is nice. And always ask yourself how you knew that you wanted to do that, or why you wanted to do that. These are the questions that guide us. As for me, I'm going to continue looking for these things. I'm going to continue observing. I'm going to continue documenting them by talking about them, hopefully if I ever get around to actually writing them down. I'm going to keep exploring, and I'm going to keep teaching about this, because I honestly believe, I've said this a few times, the amount of unknown unknowns that is coming towards us in terms of how software is interacting with our life, the things that software is doing, it's amazing and it's terrifying as well. And I'm super, super excited about all of the really awesome technology and automation and things we have there. And I believe very firmly that we cannot automate away exploration. At least not in my lifetime, so I feel like I've got a job for a while. It's cool. So take that with you. Practice it, teach it, share it, get help if you want to, work with other people, and become explorers, because we are and we can practice. Thank you very much.
Let's see if we have any questions on Slido. Yes.
Shall I just go through them?
Yeah.
Okay. So at what point? I would expect it all of the time. I want it after features, after bug fixes. If I'm doing a really big release and I have time to, I'd expect it after that. Yes, I still expect us to have conversations about specifications, but I also know that any user story is a reminder to have a conversation, and that only by doing the thing do we explore. And I don't want to put all of that effort in beforehand, because it might be the case that the user story never makes it into the sprint. So all of the things all of the time. What would you want your application to have done before? Yeah. What would you want your application architect to know before starting a project to make the project outcomes better from a testing perspective? Oh my God, I'd like to just go away with them for a weekend and tell them all of the important things. I'd like them to sit and work also with testers and test experts to talk about what kind of questions are we going to want to be asking our system manually, in production, in an automated way, and how can we design the system such that that can be the case? Because so many of the things that make systems hard to test are things that we just didn't consider during architecture decisions. And architecture is that thing that you can't change. Once it's there, it's there. And that makes a lot of systems really difficult. So I would want them to sit down and talk to me. Me personally, not so far. Yes, it is. Sorry, I should read the question, thanks. Do you use exploratory testing for non-functional tests, security, usability, performance? I have done some exploratory security testing. I did a pairing session with Santosh Tupad. It involves the same practices. It's, oh, there's this thing. Let's go and Google this. Let's see what version that is. Oh, there's this security hole. Let's see if we can do that. For usability and performance, I have not done it myself yet, but yes, it is possible. Was there ever a point in time when you believe more in heuristics than in your gut feeling? I don't know. I don't think I've only ever worked from the premise of if I have a gut feeling, there must be a heuristic behind it, and I've never approached it with a rule and then tried to get back to my gut feeling. So I don't think so. How to combine exploratory testing and writing automation tests in the same sprint. Here's the great thing. How many of you have written a test or have started automating a test only to find interesting errors with the thing that you wanted to automate? While you are automating, you are exploring. The way to an automated test is often the result of having done exploring to get there. And Marit Piarvi also says that any failed test is an invitation to explore. So for me, they go hand in hand, and it's always a question of which risks can we and what do we want to address with an automated test, and which risks can't we or don't we want to, and then to make that balance. The same way that you make a decision, is this going to be a unit test, is it going to be a UI test, is it going to be an API test? Those are conversations that we need to be having in teams. Okay, how are we for time? Can I keep going?
2 more minutes.
2 more minutes, okay. We talked mostly about exploratory testing as part of a QA process. In your opinion, could exploratory testing apply to other steps, code review, definition of edge cases? Yes, 100%, because I believe that anything that we do with our minds is intrinsically exploratory. There are very few things that we know exactly in advance what we're going to do. So everything, this is great, the explorer's mindset. I am always exploring, so yes, 100%. As a tester, do I only focus end-to-end? It has been the place where when I hear end-to-end, I understand through the UI. Is that what the person meant? Okay. I have mostly done in my career testing through the UI. Where I am expanding to is doing exploratory testing of APIs and working with developers to find out what exploratory testing for unit level things looks like. So most of my examples are from that, but it's definitely not where you have to be. There are plenty of other levels to do it at that. Can you test some tool for exploratory testing on Linux? Your brain. There are people who do use tools to record things. Anything that does logs, anything that does video capture can be useful. But I personally have always used my brain, a pen, and some paper and a mind map. Those are the tools that I need. Those are the ones that I use. Do I support Toffees or the Reds? I'm a Liverpool supporter. Are ravens dinosaurs? Yes. By virtue of them being neither sparrow nor pigeon, they are.
Okay,
they are
our
dinosaurs.
time is up.
Oh, those are the good questions.
Okay, let's.
I'm around, so if you want to
can answer these questions after this presentation. Thank you so
Thanks,
much
everybody.
for this
That was
wonderful
fun.
presentation. And this is a little gift from the craft team with a picture of you.
That's lovely. Thank you.